All right. Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order this City of Philomath Police Committee meeting held today, May 14th, 2024 at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, on this beautiful afternoon, I must say. Those in attendance today are Councillor Crocker, Councillor Causey, City Manager Chris Workman, and Police Chief Dave Gursky, and myself, Councillor Nielsen. We'll start by our first point of business will be approval of the minutes. And we actually have some housekeeping to do. We have minutes from the 13th of June of 2023, and then the minutes of February 24th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Okay, and a second by, so that's a motion by Councillor Causey and a second by Councillor Crocker. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that's unanimous, been approved. First off, we need to say Happy National Police Week. I guess it's that official acknowledgement of all the good that our police do in our nation. And so thank you.
Thank you
for all that you do. And we love our police department and appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
So thank you. And with that, we'll turn the time over to Chief Gursky for.
All right, so first we've got an update or personnel briefing. So Scott Andrade, he didn't make his probationary phase, so he was terminated on April 5th. So we have a lateral process that's open right now. We had at one time just a recruit process open in the past, and we've decided to try and go after a lateral. So that's someone that would not need to go to the academy. We'd probably say it's training time and learning. That's been open for approximately 2.5, 3 weeks now. And then we've got Coulter Forrest, who is just now transitioning into phase 3, which will be his final phase. And then we hope to see him solo sometime in July. We've got Thomas DeVick, who'll be coming out of the academy. His graduation date is May 24th. And he will then start. He hasn't completed phase 1 yet, so he'll start with phase 1, which will be a day shift phase for him. That'll kind of work on all the fundamentals with report writing and all of those sorts of things. He has had a little bit of time with us. He's familiar with all of our policies, procedures, and things like that. So once we get him out of the academy, get him in a patrol car, and he'll hit the ground running. Let's see.
Question?
Yes.
Can you remind me of the length of each of the phases, and are all 3 of those after the academy?
It depends on where the recruit is at. So with Coulter Forrest, he had a longer period of time before the academy started. So we were able to get him into phase 1 and get that completed before he went to the academy. They're typically 6 weeks long, as long as they're getting favorable or passing DORs, which is a daily observation report. And that's something, it's a kind of a grading system. I believe there are 15 points, and there's also some narratives that go along with that. So as long as they're hitting those benchmarks with acceptable scores, then they'll move along to phase 2 or phase 3, and then to a solo phase. We have seen it in the past where sometimes people are struggling and they do need to be extended. It doesn't mean that they're not going to pass. Sometimes people just need a little bit additional time to get through that phase and get a better grasp of the things that are being trained.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any applicants yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No. It's still pretty competitive out there. I think Benton County has a process open that I'm aware of right now. In fact, they posted it on the same day that we posted ours. My understanding is they have 1 position open. Corvallis is still hiring. Lynn County's hiring. Most of our regional partners are all hiring at this point. So it's still pretty tough. But we'll leave this open for a period of time, see if we attract any laterals. We've had a little bit of interest. We haven't seen any applications. We've had a couple do some ride-alongs that are working for other agencies that are not, wouldn't really call them neighboring, but they're from a distance away, and they've shown some interest, but I haven't seen an application yet.
Great.
We'll leave it open for another probably a couple weeks, and then we'll go, we'll transition to a recruit process and see if we can get some more folks interested. So. Let's see, our next agenda item is wildlife. In the last month, we've had a lot of wildlife issues.
I wanted to jump in really quick before we move from personnel.
Yeah.
Blake Bowers is working as DRE, I understand.
Yes.
And that's quite a strenuous and difficult program.
It is.
And if you could give him our thanks and commendation
I
for
will.
doing that.
Yes,
because it's not easy to do that.
Yes, he has passed the first phase of that, which is a 2-week, it's kind of a classroom portion. There's some field sobriety testing and some other skills that they work on. And then here, it'll be the first week of June, he'll be set to go down to Southern Oregon, and that's where they actually have their labs, where they'll be practicing on folks that are under the influence of various substances, and then they'll have reports to write, and then a final exam. It sounds like that's going to be a long day for him, but seems to be enjoying it and doing well. So looking forward to having him back.
Great. Anyway, good for him. And
All right, on to wildlife. So we had a bear sighting. So I think everybody heard about Corvallis's bear sighting that was in and around the downtown area and campus, and that sounded like it ended up leaving kind of to the northwest of Corvallis. And then we had a bear sighting. We don't know if it was the same one, but one crossing Chapel Drive about 5:30 in the morning, heading towards Willowbrook. So in that new subdivision, I contacted our regional biologist, our district biologist, Greg Reed, REED. He's with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and he's in out of the Corvallis office. Had some discussions with him about that, and we kind of waited to see if we had got any reports of additional sightings, which we thankfully did not. Sounded like he received a call a day or so later that maybe someone south of here out in the county had either a sighting or had some garbage cans gone through, but aside from that, we hadn't had any more reports. He indicated he got in touch with their press information officer, and they had some literature that they were ready to send out if we had more sightings, just to educate the public on bringing trash cans in, not having food for animals and things like that out there, just being careful with those types of items that might act as an attractant. And then shortly after that, we had a cougar sighting. There was a road-struck deer. It sounds like possibly 2 road-struck deer. They were just at the west end of town on Applegate, in between the clinic and Dollar General. One of our officers was dispatched early in the morning to remove one of those road-struck deer from the highway, drug that off onto the shoulder, and he was able to snap this picture, which I will pass around.
Very cool. It's very cool. I saw it in the
It
news.
is.
Isn't that cool?
oh my goodness.
Very close to town, but very,
We're
very cool. So neat. I mean, not neat, but kind of
Yeah.
neat.
Yeah. So it sounds like that was I believe the 29th of April. That particular deer was picked up by Philomath Public Works, who he also saw that same animal, or a cougar in that same area, that was still hanging around. We got a hold of Greg again at ODF&W. They came out and with one of our officers and retrieved another deer that it looked like it could have been feeding on. There was also remnants of a raccoon that looked like it had been cougar had been feeding on that. I spoke with him again and went out and set cameras, and we had this discussion about getting the trapper out there to set traps. He set a couple of cell phone cameras I think he had them deployed for about a week and a half, and there was no more activity in that area. So they came and picked up the cameras earlier this week. The other item that we have is turkeys. That's been an issue here in Philomath for quite some time. At one point, we had a safe place to dispatch those, and we were issued, I believe it was 20 tags or 24 tags at a time. They were damage control tags from Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. We had those in 2023. Those went unfilled just because we didn't have a safe space to dispatch those animals. And we did lose our place where they processed them. And so I know in talking with Greg, they're interested in feedback from neighbors that are having problems with nuisance animals like turkeys. And it sounds like they've been successful in trapping and removing some of those. But I don't think it's a viable option or a safe option for us to try and dispatch those animals in the city of Philomath anymore. I don't know that we have any safe spaces to do that.
So what's the I'm sorry, but we have had citizens talk to us about this. So what would the recommendation be then to contact?
Greg Reed, He's the district
Yes.
wildlife biologist, and I have a phone number for him if you'd like
That
it.
would be great.
So his office number is 541-757-5226. And I can also give you an email too if you'd like it.
I would like that.
So that is going to be Gregory, Gregory,
Uh-huh.
.c .reed, REED, at odfw
Uh-huh.
.oregon,
Oregon, the full word?
yes,
Okay, uh-huh.
.gov, G-O-V.
Got it. Got it. And, excuse me, may I ask Chris a question real quick?
Yeah.
So, Chris, what would be the best way to disseminate this information about what to do if you have problems with turkeys? The only reason I'm asking is because Coffee with a Counselor has been brought up twice. Well, the last 2 times I went, I don't know before that, but what's the best way to disseminate this for our city people, our individual or community members to have this information?
So I've talked to Chelsea already, so it'll be in the next newsletter. And then she's gonna do up a little diagram, put it on some social media as well.
Okay, oh, perfect.
We'll start pushing it out, so.
Oh, great, thank you, thank you. It's important that, I mean, we know and people that watch this, but if they don't, it's hard to get the information out to everybody.
And in the brief conversation that I had with Greg, it sounded like they were having similar problems in Corvallis. They were in the neighborhoods, they were causing a problem, wasn't a safe place to have those animals dispatched with a firearm, and so they were trapping them as well and relocating them.
Not bringing them to Philomath, I hope, just kidding. Sorry.
I've seen them in Corvallis, they're terrible. There's so many of them and they're big and
Yes.
They do create quite a
destruction.
mess.
Yeah.
And then I think that's about it on wildlife. I was really impressed. I have not worked with Greg Reed all that much. Nancy Taylor was the biologist that I was working with previously when we had turkey issues and things like that. She's retired a few years ago, and Greg was pretty helpful. After we met up a couple of times, he became a little bit more responsive, and then he ended up bringing another biologist out. And let's see. I don't have a last name, but she was helpful as well. They were very responsive. They were emailing me, giving me updates about the lack of activity on the cameras that they had set, and so that was helpful.
Yeah, another question about the turkey issue. Is it, we don't have any codes against feeding them, do we? Or is it, we do? So we're really, as a city community members, we're really not allowed to feed them on our property?
No, and that brings up another issue. We do have an island property up off of North 9th Street that is in the county, and they are feeding them, and Greg is aware of that property as well. But because they're in the county, our ordinances don't apply.
All right, but it is for the, could that be mentioned in Chelsea's?
newsletter, yeah.
Yes, newsletter.
We're gonna get a picture of the feeder up there, the big X through it. Maybe you pointed at little neighbor.
All right, thank you, just trying to make it as doable and successful as possible with this.
Sure.
All right, sorry for the interruption.
Looks like our next agenda item is traffic on 15th Street. And that was from the lunch hour and then also after school. We've got officers in that area, and we didn't observe any citable violations that were occurring in our presence during that time.
And do you know about how many, was it just for one day, or do you
No,
know?
it was multiple days, so I don't have a solid time estimate, but multiple days.
And that was during the lunch hour and the after school?
Is that the area that we had a citizen request a crosswalk? Because kids coming from the school going down to like 16th and Mill Pond and all those would be going there, and there's no crosswalk for 15th or 16th, maybe one of the two or maybe both. And they were requesting that we get something for safety for the kids. That same person wanted one between the rodeo grounds and Cedar, was it, or something like that? Because maybe it was the Easter egg drop. Yeah,
Across 13th.
yes, that they said people were walking through and dodging traffic, and it wasn't safe.
I think we had a conversation with Chris about that, the crosswalks, and, is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, Dave and I talked about that as well, and I think we're both on the same page. Really the safest it can be right now is the way it is right now, where pedestrians don't have a right to cross right there. If you had an intersection, pedestrians have a right to cross. It's not an intersection, it's mid-block.
Right.
But once we start putting up signage or striping, now we've got an onerous to have that as safe as possible for pedestrians to cross, and they have the right to cross there. So right now, there is no pedestrian right to cross there, which means the pedestrian has to be responsible to make sure that the road's clear. And that stretch, we looked at again just this morning, when you're looking north and south, you can see quite a ways both directions. For a pedestrian looking across there, it's actually a relatively safe place to cross. There's no bends or turns or sight issues with anything. So it's relatively safe now, especially since the pedestrian doesn't have any expectation that it's a safe place for them to cross, because there isn't signage or crosswalks or markings. Long term, as that street does get developed, I think that is an ideal spot that we could maybe do some bulb outs on the curbs there, and maybe even raise like a hump where they could cross across, where they could cross, to set that level of expectations along that very straight and flat street. So there's opportunity to make it more safe when that road gets developed, but until the road's developed, I would not recommend doing any pedestrian improvements right there. There's no overhead light in that area. Both of the lights, they're like right in the middle of the two street lights there. So it would take quite an investment to make that safer. And I would hate to make it a little bit safer if we're not able to really make it a safe place to cross.
And the crosswalk on 15th?
15th and Applegate, that one I believe is on, that's on our list for the summer projects. There was a small list of items we were trying to do. Some of that budget got shot with 16th Street, but Gary's going to do his best, see if he can get some markers and just do that one ourselves. Just get some of that heated tape that gets put down.
Yeah, I checked in with him a couple of weeks ago and he said they're waiting for the weather to be appropriate to put that down because it doesn't work in that.
Yeah, there's 5 or 6 areas that we were gonna do, but again, some of that budget got hit with the 16th Street project. If you remember on the CIP, there was a list of, I think they just called it school projects that were identified. So that money had to get transferred up into the 16th Street project with over budget, so. But again, Gary's pretty good. That's a priority spot for him. So we may not do some of the stuff up on College and Pioneer that we were gonna try to do, but the one on 15th Street.
And I think that someone requested one further south of on 15th, more closer
Only
to
a block further to the
Yeah.
south. That one I don't see as a higher priority. It's pretty residential there. I mean, there's traffic on 15th Street, but I don't feel like any more traffic there than there are on the roads, and we just can't stripe every intersection. So if we could stripe the one up on the north side again and encourage kids to go up to that north to cross, I think that's better.
At the opposite side of, isn't the school though on the south side? Or am I on
This is the
north?
south side. It's the south crossing that goes from east to west or west to east along the south side of Applegate Street.
Okay, that's when you said
Crossing
north, I thought, wait a minute, that means they cross the street to cross the street and that's.
Crossing 15th Street. We want them to go all the way
Yes.
up 15th Street to the top and then cross.
Okay.
Chief, I have another question. Is there any benefit to having an occasional officer out on that street during those hours that noon and then after school on 15th, just occasionally? Do we ever, just to keep that as a safe, if there's a history of that being a place that people occasionally speed,
I think.
is there any use to having someone there just sporadically?
So I think we've had a history of complaints there, but not necessarily investigated that are founded.
Okay.
I think that sometimes there are some areas, especially that area where the street, if there's other cars parked feels narrow and it feels fast, even if somebody's doing 25, 26, 27 miles an hour. I think it gives the appearance as they're coming down the hill that it is a little bit faster, or it appears to be faster than it is. I see the same thing right there as you come past the credit union on the Applegate or the east side of Main Street as they come together. That little S curve right there, we get complaints about that area. There are a number of areas in town that we get complaints that we've dedicated resources, including doing traffic studies with our speed sign in both stealth mode and with the digits and speed displayed. And we're not seeing the data to support those complaints. And so right now, officers are targeting the construction zones mainly, and then of course, the school zones during those high traffic hours. And I think that's probably where those resources are best spent, just because we've got safety concerns with the construction area that's going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, we had a community member that was talking a lot previously about Ninth. Remember the Ninth comes down, there was an area right on that area, would be north of Pioneer and in that area where the hills comes down. You're going south on Ninth into towards Main Street. That was a concern for a time as well, but that didn't improve.
Yeah, and I would encourage those folks to call into the office, and I mean, we can certainly do dedicated patrols, or at least at times assign folks to some of those problem areas or what they believe to be problem times, and then collect some data and see if that is occurring, or if we can at least respond to what we're seeing, you know.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Are you seeing that people are observing the school zones and 20 miles per hour or not?
Generally, we've had some requests from the schools to do extra patrols, especially in the morning. Morning traffic seems to be when people are really in a rush, and it seems like later in the day we've got folks. Sometimes it's commuter traffic or folks that are picking up their kids, and it seems to be a little bit better in the afternoon than it is first thing in the morning. It feels like people are a little bit more in a rush. We've had some opportunities to educate some truck drivers that were traveling a little bit too fast in those zones, and that was the subject of at least one of those complaints, and that seems to have corrected itself.
I was driving through one of them today, and there was a truck driver trying to push me on the road, and I thought, the one on Walnut, they have, I think, hit enough people that everybody slows down and goes slow there, and that's the only place I see that visual people really stopping and slowing down. And so I was wondering what we were doing here, and this was on 19th, right outside Clemens. But,
I take Apple Drive in the morning, and traffic has been really good about slowing down there consistently as you're approaching the middle school there, and then all the way past 19th Street. It comes to it's at 20 miles an hour tops through there. It's good, and I don't see it, which is interesting because of all the places in town, it's where I see the least number of students that are walking or biking is on that south end. But no, the vehicles there definitely slow down.
well, 19th would be a spot for us to watch, I think.
The spot that I'm most disappointed in consistently is at 17th Street crossing, just because you don't see it until you're right on top of it. I mean, you really don't. Signs and everything else are less than 100 feet away from it, and it's like you're there and on top of it before you even realize that there's a crossing there, especially if you're just coming through town. I mean, I know that it's there, and I'm often like, oh, shoot, I'm already here, And so, and generally it's because all of the rest of traffic's just moving, right? And when I'm always surprised that traffic doesn't go a little bit slower through there.
You bet. It looks like our next agenda item is electric vehicles or golf carts. So I started to do a little bit of research on that, and I found that Newburgh, King City, there was a number of cities across Oregon that have golf courses in them that also have an ordinance that allows for golf carts or electric vehicles. I've seen some pros and some cons with that. King City was having some issues with drivers that had medical suspensions that were trying to utilize their golf carts to drive, and you still would need a valid driver's license in Oregon. And then I came across statute, it's Oregon Revised Statute 810.070, and it's titled the Use of Golf Carts on Highways. And the first paragraph of it reads, a road authority on any of its own highways that are located adjacent to a golf course may permit the operation of golf carts between the golf course and the place where golf carts are parked or stored or located within or bounded by real estate development. Problem is we don't have a golf course. So that's what this ORS requires in order to operate a golf cart on a state highway.
So it's illegal anywhere else.
Right, unless you have an ordinance that allows for it. But I mean, this Oregon revised statute is very clear about operating a golf cart on a state highway, that you need a golf course, and it would be the adjacent properties where those golf carts are stored, and then they would be able to operate the golf course.
King City is a senior-oriented community. I used to live up near there. And so it kind of makes sense that they would have that as long as they are driven safely. But we don't have any one spot that is a senior living spot. So
And I think the big concern for the police department would be safety with the state highway, and especially with this one being a preferred truck route now. And I just think it's probably not a good mix.
no protection.
Now, as that question about preferred truck route, your officers are just as likely to stop a truck that is speeding through town as other, I mean, it's not like we hesitate when they're trucks because they're a truck.
Right, not at all. Yeah, they have to follow the same rules, and well, Oregon State Police, they've got truck inspectors that if we stop a vehicle that we believe is unsafe, the equipment's unsafe, or there's a potential that they're driving outside of their restrictions with regards to their logs and how much rest time they've had, we can call for one of them to come bring them to the nearest scale to do an evaluation. In the past, we've had someone that was certified to do that when we were at full staff. That was something that we would probably look to see if we have interest for that again. The motor carrier department has been staffing the weigh scales a little bit more frequently than they have in years past, and so I know they've been catching a couple of them coming through that are overweight and things like that. But definitely something that we could look at as we get to full staff again in the future. Have a dedicated truck inspector. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was, if it would be appropriate, Chris, let me know if I shouldn't. One of our counselors one of the city counselors is interested in knowing the pros and cons of or the advantages of contracting with like county rather than hiring additional officers. I was wondering in the future, maybe at the next meeting, you could possibly do like a pros and cons of and officially so that we would have something or could submit to Chris or
I think
Chris.
he's got a response for the budget committee, because that came up in budget committee. So
Okay.
he's got a written response, and
Oh,
we'll talk
perfect.
about it tomorrow night.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to make sure, because that's been brought, that counselor has brought that up at a few meetings we've been at. So
Yeah.
you have.
I think my response is pretty clear. Yeah, you'll see that in the
Okay,
memo.
that's, as long as that was covered, I wanted to make sure we addressed that because they have brought it up in numerous meetings, so that's gonna be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, we're still, as much as we've increased our salaries for our officers, we're still one of the lowest paying places in town, which means we're one of the cheapest places in town officer. So anybody else that we would hire with or contract with, they're gonna charge us at least what they're paying their hourly, plus their administrative costs on top of it. So there's really not a way to get a cheaper law enforcement
Right.
officer here in town. The only time that works for communities is if they don't have a police department. So you're not paying for a chief and sergeants and administration and all of the budgeting and the expenses that go into just running a department and vehicles and equipment. And if you're just hiring a sheriff's deputy to come and run patrol in your community for a few hours a day or a few hours a week, it'll be less expensive than having a full police department, but you don't have a police presence like we have a police presence. And so there's trade-offs to that. But even then, you're paying that sheriff's department much more than what you're gonna pay for just having an officer, but you don't have all of the overhead that comes with that, the oversight. And you do pay for it, it's just that it's wrapped into that cost per hour for those officers that come, so.
So that'll be brought up at the budget committee meeting?
Yeah, we'll talk about it tomorrow night. I think your written response should already be out to everybody.
Yeah, it is.
But he'll be available tomorrow night and we can ask him that question.
I totally missed that one. Is that?
Is it in the packet we got yesterday?
Oh, okay, that
I
you read
haven't
it yet.
looked at it yet.
One meeting, we do one meeting a day is my limit. Sorry.
To expand on that, I think additionally, the other thing that's hard to measure that you don't see is the crime that's deterred just by having officers here in town, you know, just uniform patrols that are out driving around. And if you're contracting with another agency, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are in town patrolling. They're available for calls for service. And geographically speaking, if you're talking about a sheriff's deputy that's responsible for safety in the entire county, they could be coming from Adair Village, they could be coming from Alsea, they could be coming from quite a distance. And so really from a safety standpoint as well, it's much safer to have two officers on at a time, so that way they're within, you know, reasonable response time. Because some situations that we respond to, you don't have 15 minutes to wait before you take action. It's got to be immediate. And so that's one of the concerns that I have with that.
Do we have enough vehicles to have two officers on? So they're not gonna be in the same vehicle.
They will not, no.
Oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
you put your hand up, you're the right one.
Councilor Causey.
Can you just remind me, I know our compliance officer is becoming an officer. Are we going to, is it compliance, are those duties going to be given to a regular officer or?
Several of them, I think the two new recruits will be tasked with that in field training, and then that'll be kind of dispersed amongst those officers to handle throughout the spring and summertime this year.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And with your position open, with the one position open, if that's filled, will you be fully staffed or no?
We will be, yes. Yep. Well, I guess with the caveat that we need these folks off of probation so where they can be solo, and then they will be able to operate in a solo status in their own patrol car. But currently, the two recruits are still in FTEP, or one of them's in the academy, and then that's a two-man car. So they will be with a field training officer and a recruit.
And the compliance officer position, do they, if they see something out of compliance when they're driving around, do they stop and inquire, or do they just wait for complaints to come in?
Typically, they're complaint driven. If we see their, you know, abandoned vehicles, attractive nuisances, things that would be a hazard, those oftentimes get addressed simply with a door hanger. So if they observe something that's a ordinance violation, we've got door hangers with check boxes on them, and there's a place to write notes and, you know, who stopped by, what date, what time, where they can reach out, or they can also leave a business card with their email on it. And so we place those door hangers, and then that usually prompts a call into the office, and they want some information. We provide them with some information, and then oftentimes we're willing to work with them if they've got a busy work schedule, and you know, work with them to get that property back into compliance.
The neighbors have stepped up, but we have a neighbor a couple doors down that the mother's disabled, the daughter's disabled, and they're the only ones that live there now because the father passed away.
Okay.
And their grass has grown to 4 feet tall, and it's obviously out of compliance, but you have to have a heart too.
Sure.
I mean, some of us have just gone over and helped mow, but is there any, that's what needs to be done. There's no group that does that out of the goodness of their heart or whatever.
I'm not aware of.
You see neighbors, church groups get together and do stuff, but you know, if you don't have those resources, you can call the non-emergency number of the police department, and they'll send somebody out just to knock on the door and see if they need help. And they're not going to show up with the guns drawn, you know, to mow the grass, but they will show up, and our officers are pretty good about, you know, letting them know where resources are available a little bit too, trying to be helpful, solve the problem rather than
Well, it
most
wasn't,
enforced.
it's been months, and so finally some of us got together and did it, and hopefully we'll be able to continue, but it's, there's no, I mean, there's no way they can do it. They're just not physically able. So,
And with summer approaching and some of our lots that when we drive through that have really tall, are
Like
we gonna be?
Seventh and Applegate,
Sorry,
is that what you're
yes.
thinking?
Yeah, will we then, before the heat of summer comes and things become too dry, are we gonna be out making notices on things
Yep.
like that?
sounds like we have to complain, or somebody has to complain first, maybe.
Well, that one you're pretty good about keeping,
Yeah, I mean, that was for sale for a while, and the realtor was making arrangements there. It's been, I believe that sale's been transferred now, so it's got new ownership. They're looking at a development plan there, so it's kind of in between, but, yeah, when those, yeah, when they start getting real bad, I mean, we start being a little bit more, that'll be on the list of things for our new officers to do, is to make the rounds and look for things that are obviously out of compliance. On social media a while back, there's complaints about brushes and trees that were hanging out over the sidewalk, making it hard to get around. And those are types of things that, again, as we get new officers on, it helps them get familiar with the code, and those are fairly easy, warnings and citations to give and stuff. So I think having the new officers this summer, they can be pretty active in doing that. Obviously, we don't want them doing code enforcement all the time, but to be assigned, hey, you got 2 hours, go around and do some code enforcement in the neighborhoods. I think that's a good opportunity, a good learning opportunity for them.
Yeah.
And then other than that, then it'd still be complaint driven. So if you see something and it doesn't seem right or look right, then just call the non-emergency number.
And on that particular property, I think we normally generate a letter that we send out to the owner. That's what we've done in the years past to get them to take care of it and get it cut.
This fire, I'm just very sensitive this summer, fires, and nice to have some things ready prior to high fire season.
Yep.
Other things, if not, I have one more on my list.
Okay,
Okay, go ahead. Councilor, you go
Is
first.
there a restriction on how close you can park to a corner?
There is, and normally the curbs are striped, and they're yellow, and that's the visual indicator, so they know not to park there.
We have a corner in our neighborhood where there's you can't see around.
Is that Canberra and?
Yes.
I just got, okay, I did talk to them. You notice they pulled the trucks back? They pulled them back? Okay. I did like an unofficial, just neighbor to neighbor cookie drop and conversation.
Oh, cookie drop.
So they have pulled, if you notice now, they've pulled the truck back to the level of their fence. So, which is actually even further than the corner
Okay.
margins.
So what's, how far back
Yeah,
are we
how far?
supposed to be?
I'd have to look. I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but I believe it's a few car lengths.
Oh, yeah, no way.
Okay. But you check it now. I think it's much better.
I will, on the way.
Sometimes I think just neighbor to neighbor talking as friends and explaining about difficulties. That's how I approached it. Might not have been right,
Sounds right to me.
but as neighbors, just talking and discussing things and saying it's difficult to see. Would it be possible for you to not park?
Yeah, I think a lot of times they're unaware.
Yeah. And I think they just think, oh, I didn't think it really bothered anybody. I'm like, well, it just makes it difficult, and it's a safety thing. And you would feel terrible if one of our neighbors or someone visiting were in an accident at that corner because of that. And I know that wasn't your intention, so you do it, as positive and encouraging as you can. And I noticed they have moved it back to and now they park with a fence, which is better.
You set the bar pretty high with those cookies.
Yeah.
I expect the officers to cookies.
Probably on Applegate West at 19th, there's some fences. One's a rather new fence and one's not, but it's really kind of difficult to see. Are there
Bed heights, I guess. I don't know.
laws about how close the fence can be to the road? There is a sidewalk, but it goes right up to the sidewalk. And it makes it difficult to see.
We do have an ordinance for fencing and intersections, yeah.
And so I suppose I should have looked that up.
Yeah.
Just, you know, send an email out of the address to have them, could that be checked if the?
Yeah, that's
email
something
is
that we
in?
can look at. You bet.
I hate causing trouble.
No, yes. Anything else, Councilor?
No, that's all.
I had one thing, just a consideration, not a request, but consideration. In regards to the police officers and community involvement, would it be possible to kind of get a calendar that could be a part of our agenda showing, and on the agenda for police committee, those dates when the police are actively involved in community
Yeah.
interactions?
Absolutely.
Like the date for, I know we have it on newsletters and things, but I think even having that present on a bi-monthly
Yeah.
would be a good idea to show and to demonstrate and to encourage community involvement. And these are activities where we're going to be interacting and with our community, and these are the dates and times, getting it on the agenda and then having
Yeah.
it be a part of our newsletter. I think that would be a positive thing.
You bet. In fact, our next one coming up is gonna be the first week of June. It'll be the bike rodeo, so we'll have kids, or we'll have officers in the school, and then we just purchased 2 bikes for that event. And but yeah, that'll be our next one, and we've got several others planned throughout the summer, so
I think that would
definitely.
be a really good thing. It's good PR and good, and on the, just based on my personal experience, who was the officer that came, and spoke?
Thurman.
Thurman. There is, Officer Thurman came and spoke at a church gathering about some incidents that had occurred where someone that was uninvited came to a church.
Walking into the
Yes.
churches.
Or even asking to spend the night or stay inside the church buildings, which at our church isn't allowed. Officer Thurman did a really good job, I thought, about explaining about when to call 911 and how to, and feeling confident and availability and times when it is very appropriate. I think sometimes we, as community members, hesitate to call 911 when we really could in situations that could be threatening or uncomfortable. And Officer Thurman did a really good job of explaining when it is, please, encouraging in certain situations that it's very appropriate to call. And that it didn't mean that they were coming in with lights and sirens
Right.
but explaining how he dealt with situations where, in a calm and productive way in getting the people the help that they need, the individuals the help that they need. I think that would be a really good thing to even, not just that small group of individuals there, but the public in general to know when it's okay to call 911 if you are concerned about personal safety or you have doubts about a parking lot situation or a nighttime. I think sometimes we hesitate because we don't want lights and sirens and we don't want to get anyone in trouble. But and when it comes to personal safety, I think that knowledge is helpful.
And we have those same conversations with Coffee with the Cop and then National Night Out. Those are one of the things that we talk about, making sure that we educate the public about when it's okay, because we see that a lot. And you and I had a conversation about that, how often that we hear from somebody, when we go to investigate a theft or kind of a cold call that's not occurring in the moment, and we'll talk to a neighbor and say, oh yeah, well I heard something last night, but I didn't want to bother you guys. And encouraging them when they see something to make sure that they call and let us know, so that way we can investigate it.
Right. But thank you for that. I think that's just really important as far as informing and educating the public and those that. Thank you for that. So if that could be something we can consider, I would appreciate that. Just to let them know and also encourage a positive relationship that we have and encourage that amongst the community as
You
well.
bet.
All right.
Do you want that report coming to here? Do you want that to go to like the council once a quarter?
What do you think? I mean,
I mean, we're doing the management report. It could be included in there, but then it might get kind of hidden. But
right.
I don't know if that'd be.
So what goes in the newsletter now? I know that before we always have it when it's coming up, but we don't have like a countdown calendar for the newsletter, do we? That's upcoming months things or?
We still do, yeah. There's quite a bit on there for upcoming events, meetings, or city events.
Could we do something in there?
Chief's Corner or
Yeah.
something that he can put just, we're
Upcoming.
gonna be out doing this on this day or whatever. I think that would be good PR.
I do too.
If
Chief
the
Corner,
There it is.
Yeah, and that could be even used for a lot of disseminating information.
Sure.
So, I think that could be helpful. But that's just something to consider. I know you've got a full plate, but anytime we can get knowledge and information to our,
Yeah, and a lot of those outreach events are not attended as well as we would like. You know, I think Coffee with a Cop is one that's kind of difficult, but that's a great small group setting to have those discussions. We've got officers there. There's multiple, you know, representatives from our office that are there and available to talk about anything people want to talk about.
and will that be held at Citizen Bank or over at Timbertown?
It should be a Citizens Bank. That's where we've done, and we'll probably plan for that. We may have, depending on what our agenda looks like this summer, we may look for doing that in the fall. So we'll have National Night Out. We've got Chili Cook-Off that we're working on. We'll also have Trunk or Treat. So we've got really actually 4 events planned here in the next couple of months. So
I might suggest, and you might be busy and can't do this, but the farmer's market that we have on Sundays, we've got a table, I guess, for Palomas government, and maybe once a month or something like that, you guys could do something.
in fact, I think we ran into Officer Wycla and I last summer. We ran into you and Christopher. We actually were walking around, and that was
Did
a
you
great.
get complaints about me? We were trying to get people signed up for the emergency phone thing,
Yeah, no, that's a great idea.
but yeah, just having visual would be good.
I think interactions with our officers really makes a huge difference and the comfort level of individuals to reach out and seek the help they need because they recognize and they're comfortable and it's familiar.
You bet.
So I think that's helpful. Other items? If not, it would be time-wise. Look at this. May I then adjourn the meeting?